Welcome to the Venture Clash Entrepreneurship Podcast, where we meet entrepreneurs in the digital health and fintech spaces. Together, we'll hear real-world stories, gain practical insights, and discover the amazing things happening behind the scenes of thriving early-stage companies making their mark. It's time for the Venture Clash Entrepreneurship Podcast.
Hi there, everybody. Welcome to another installment of the Venture Clash Entrepreneurship Podcast. We are in episode 3 today. My name is Kenny Jang, host of the podcast, and today I'm fortunate to be sitting across the interwebs from Blake, who is the co-founder and chief product officer of Inbox Health. Prior to that, he's been starting Inbox Health. He's been in the finance and product management area, eventually working on consumer financing products for elective procedures in healthcare. And that experience is apparently what led him to the founding of Inbox Health, as he recognized the struggle in the doctor's offices to collect money from patients, etc. The Connecticut-based startup really is trying to pioneer within this digital health space, and I'm glad to have you with us here today, Blake. Welcome.
Thanks, Ken. Good to be here.
So first, let us learn a little bit about your story and your background, Blake, and how you got interested in the entrepreneurship community and healthcare in particular.
It's kind of interesting. In college, I studied musicology, which is basically just music history and theory. So it had nothing to do with anything that I'm doing now. But I do think that, it's part of my creative streak, maybe. And then as I left school, I started getting involved in finance, commercial financing for doctors' offices, and then eventually working in a product management role on a consumer elective procedure financing product. So, you go into the plastic surgeon and you need financing for that procedure. That's sort of where I sort of was introduced to the issues that traditional doctors, non-elective procedures, were actually facing as they started to become interested in these financing products for their practices. You didn't really want the cardiologist offering an interest-free loan to the old lady who needed her heart taken care of. You kind of wanted that problem to be solved in another way. So that's sort of where I got the inkling for Inbox Health and started down that path. So it was an interesting winding road, but I'm happy with where it led.
Interesting. And so the iteration of Inbox Health today is you are attempting to redesign this entire patient payment experience with the doctor's office. And I think anyone watching here that has dealt with any doctor's office can sympathize or empathize with that pain point in particular, right? That unending correspondence, and it's just confusing, it's time consuming, it's just a headache. And you're trying to unravel all of that, basically, right?
Yeah, and it's funny because our customer is the doctor's office because they're the ones losing money and who need to solve the problem most. Yes. But the patients are also benefiting greatly because the experience on their side, as everyone knows, is just terrible. I mean, it lacks any transparency. You never know how much it's going to cost. And people have much higher deductibles now than they ever have before. So it's a growing problem for both patients and their doctors, and the doctors are just the ones willing to pay to fix it.
Wow, that's interesting to hear that it's the doctors that actually care about it in the end, although it's probably wallet-driven. So let's go back to the beginning. How old is Inbox Health? How far have you guys been into this whole venture?
So we started in April 2014, so we're going on about 2 years now.
Gotcha.
And we launched our first product January 2015. So we've been out in the market for about a year and a half now.
How many people do you have on your team right now?
We have 4 software engineers and 2 people in the sales and support roles, and then our CEO and myself are sort of outside that group there. So I think
Gotcha.
8 total.
8 total. And then I love founder stories. One of the things that we talked about in the pre-call area is that you have an interesting connection or a long-time connection with one of the co-founders. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it was 4th grade. I went to his birthday party, and all throughout high school, we were involved in music together. We did all the musicals in high school. And we fell out of touch a little bit in college. We went different ways. But after school, he had been working at 3M. They had a healthcare division. It's called 3M HIS. And he was working there. And I had come up with this idea. And I'm more on the design side, product management side. And he's like one of those kids who he was programming when he was in diapers. And I always thought he was kind of a nerd, but nerds become infinitely more valuable later in life, especially when you're in the startup field. So we started working together on the product. But yeah, we have quite the history, mostly a musical history, but it's become more of a technology history lately.
That's funny. Yeah, nerds win in the end sometimes in life. Okay, let's go back to your product. So tell us a little bit about the actual service that you are actually delivering. Is it a service as software as a service? Is it a consultation? What is it?
Yeah, it's a software as a service platform that the doctors subscribe to, and it's really what we call a patient revenue management platform. So it encompasses a lot of the patient experience, and what we really like to do is start the patient's payment experience far earlier than most other products do. So we start with the patient at check-in before they ever come to the office. We're actually sending them text messages and emails, reminding them about their visit, and then letting them check in online. And then as part of that check-in process, we educate them about their benefits. So we actually connect to insurance companies, pull back data from the insurance companies, and help them understand what the costs are going to be before they go into the office. So then a lot of what we see as the problem in the healthcare space is expectations are never set. And it's very difficult to do. So as the patients are coming in through Inbox Health, they're actually having their cost expectations set. They really understand how their insurance works, what it's going to cover, what it's not going to cover. And so they go into the office a lot more prepared. And with Inbox Health, they've often already paid for a good portion of the procedure beforehand. Right. And on the backside, we have this platform that lets the doctor's staff manage the entire process, makes it really easy and automated. But also makes the whole experience a lot more digital friendly for the patient. So it's just a better experience on both sides of the table.
Nice. And so what's the average sweet spot for your customer? Is it a solo practitioner? Is it a medical, group practice?
Yeah, so as we started out, and I think this is probably typical for a lot of new SaaS companies, we've started with smaller groups. Especially in the healthcare space, I think a lot of digital health companies can probably relate to the experience of integration woes. So it's a very integration-heavy industry. There's a lot of powerful, large players in the EHR, electronic health records companies. They really own the data and own the space, and working with them can be very difficult as a new startup. So starting small lets us sort of get our feet wet, get the product tested, right. Ramp it up. And now we're sort of in this middle ground where we're working with 6 to 8 practitioners, so 6 to 8 doctors in the office, and looking to grow towards a larger customer. And we're starting those conversations now with some of the larger enterprise healthcare players. So you think there's everywhere from the doc around the corner to Yale Medical Group or Kaiser out in California that are hundreds of doctors across an entire state. So that's really where we'd like to end up ultimately. But I think building the product and getting your foot in the door is easiest in the smaller groups, nice. Especially in the healthcare space.
So how much traction have you gotten to date? How many customers? How are you guys faring right now?
So we have over 150 practices that are using our product all across the country. Definitely a little bit heavier in the Northeast where we're located, but a lot of what we've done with the smaller groups has been SEO conversions, Google AdWords conversions, and that's just been nationwide, and we've been able to quickly get over 100 customers. So it's great to have people using the software. 600,000 patients have come through it. So it's pretty heavily used, and it helps you sort of prove out that model as nice. You go into the larger
So if you are using pay-per-click advertising for lead generation, the actual subscription cost must be, it's not a high-value, high-dollar product, not in the 5-digit, 6-digit range, right? What's the average cost for a practice to adopt your services?
So for most small practices, they're paying about $100 a month. So it's in a small practice setting, it's definitely a lower ticket cost. But as we sort of built out our product a little bit more and are moving upstream in terms of going to larger clients, it's definitely something that's increasing. Like we're starting to see now, larger clients are in the $1,200 to $1,500 a month range. So it's definitely something that's shifted over time. And it's always kind of interesting as we're a new company. We're talking to venture capitalists all the time, and over the period of time that we're talking to them, things will change pretty greatly. So it's always interesting trying to tell that story in a convincing way to make sure that they understand how things have to shift, especially in the healthcare space, because it's a very unique space. Things can take a little bit longer than in other spaces. But I think that if you have the right investor partners who sort of understand that digital health space, I think that they can wrap their heads around it a little bit better.
Okay. And so are you actually able to acquire the customer on the internet and get them onboarded without any of your team members actually picking up the phone or getting involved?
Yeah, we are. We didn't think that we'd be able to. I think a lot of people doubted that that was possible in healthcare. But yes, we do that more often than anything else.
That's pretty cool.
We spent a lot of time building out an onboarding process that was entirely digital. And one of the great tools that we actually utilize for sort of helping with that process is called Intercom, which is a great support tool that's very engaging for the customer, to bringing them into the process and having someone there for them all the time. So when they get stuck at that step and they have that question, about how many doctors can I have? Can I do this? Can I do this? We can walk them through it via chat, and it saves us a lot of time and lets us onboard a lot more people without. We don't really have a sales team.
Right.
We're a small company. We have one support person who really can't manage all of the onboarding process. So it's been great to have that digital, but it's certainly something like now that we are into the larger groups, we're doing, on-site training, frequent training webinars. So that too shifts as you go, but definitely when we were starting out, that was the way to go.
I think especially for the clear majority of smaller practices, being able to sell online is just a huge game changer, right? It's basically
it's a competitive edge in a way, because it's
Yes.
so rare in the healthcare space that there are groups that just want that easy access, and we're one of the few people who can provide that to them.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you've got that sweet story where you can go just walk onto Shark Tank and say, I just need more money to scale.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about the support network that you actually have. You obviously are doing really well, and typically behind great entrepreneur stories, there are either mentors or a network that's installed. Do you have that type of support system located where you are? First of all, where are you guys located and operating out of?
So we're located in Bridgeport, Connecticut, right downtown, and it's a very up-and-coming city. One of the best things about it is that we're very close to New York, Boston, and the insurance companies, which are all in Hartford.
Yeah.
But we have cheaper rent by far and lower salaries by far than any of those major metro areas. So it's kind of got the best of both worlds.
Yeah. So are you seeing other peer digital health companies in that area? Because it seems to be that medical, healthcare, pharma, this area, its geography tends to be high concentration of those type of entities.
I definitely feel like New York is becoming the hub for digital health, and we're very close to it. Connecticut itself, I think, one of the great things in Connecticut is Connecticut Innovations, and digital health has been huge for them.
Yeah.
Having Yale University, obviously biotech becomes a little bit more of a focus with some of the academic hubs, but there's definitely also a growing digital health scene, both in Connecticut and especially in New York City.
Gotcha. And then you've got an actual acquisition under your belt already as an entrepreneur, right?
We do, yeah, and I think that goes back to the support systems. We're part of a program called Startup Health, which is it's sort of a long-term incubator program. We've been in it for the entire 2 years, and Cake Health was in it as well. And we've been talking to the founder of Cake Health for a long time, and it was sort of a natural fit. Cake Health. What Cake Health was basically meant for healthcare.
Inbox Health is aimed at the doctor and the practitioner, and Cake Health is actually focused on the patient itself, right? So
Exactly,
it's a great marriage.
yeah. So Cake Health was helping the patients sort of catalog and organize their health expenses.
Right.
So by connecting that with our platform, that was helping the doctors get better at digitally connecting to patients and billing patients digitally. Connecting those two things lets us sort of spread the wealth. So the patient then who is going to a doctor's office that uses Inbox Health is able to not just pay their bills to that doctor, but pay any bill to any doctor. And so for us, it's sort of naturally a lead generation machine, because it's just sending Inbox Health right into these other doctors' offices that they're connecting with. And on the patient consumer side, it's super convenient. So it just makes our product that much more valuable, both to the doctor and then to the patient, who sort of our customer by default, as their relationship with the provider makes them our customer.
Have you learned anything about that acquisition process? If you were to talk to other peer entrepreneurs right now in a similar space and spot, what's your biggest advice about that?
I think it's tricky. We actually were sought for an acquisition by another company as well, and that didn't pan out. And I think it's all about fit. The products really have to be the perfect fit, and the teams have to be a perfect fit. And I think that you just have to be patient and not make any rash decisions. It has to be perfect because this is like, your company's your baby. There's only going to be one time when you can sell it, and it may not ever be right to sell it. So I think it's just got to be perfect, and it's just I'd advocate for patience and seek out advice of wise people and talk about it a lot before you make any moves. But yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about selling a company that you've built yourself.
Where were their operations located? Were they by you, or there's some geographically somewhere else?
Well, so they were in San Francisco, but we didn't bring on any of their staff other than Rebecca herself as an advisor. We were really just acquiring the product and the technology behind the product, and that was what was important to us, and that's what they were set up to do. So that was a little bit of an interesting acquisition, and it really stemmed from our mutual relationship with Startup Health.
Nice. Well, it sounds like you guys are on a fantastic ride. Are you ready, Blake, for our lightning round of questions as we close out the interview?
I think I am, yeah.
Okay. So the first one is, as a startup entrepreneur, I think everyone in this lifestyle understands that we only have 24 hours a day. You probably feel that hard stop, the limitation, the human limitation there. Productivity obviously is something that we always are trying to up the game on. What digital productivity tool, resource, approach, or service has been uber helpful for you and your team in this go around for this iteration of your startup?
So I think there's two things that I think a lot of people are using. One is Slack. And Slack is really the heart of our entire organization. Everything in our Inbox Health app connects to it. When a new customer signs up, when they have a question, everything goes to Slack. When a payment is made by a patient, it goes through Slack. All of it goes through Slack. And it really lets us connect and catalog everything that we do. There's a few other companies that are doing similar things. And I think having something like that today is essential. When you're starting a company, started out with a tool like that, you have this opportunity with a fresh start to have this uber productive company, and Slack or HipChat, one of those things is a great tool to sort of have to connect the entire organization.
Did you guys build custom hooks into Slack, or were you using other things?
And it's really easy to do too. It's not at all. I mean, if you're a software engineer, it's very easy. It's not everything we do. That's every new product feature. It all gets a connection to Slack, and it's super easy. They make it really easy to do.
That's really neat. Okay.
The other one though,
second
Asana.
Question. Everyone is loving podcasts these days, right? Just like this, I think the rise of Netflix, etc. Everyone's consuming content on demand. What podcasts are you listening to these days to get up an edge in entrepreneurship and business and life?
So there's two podcasts that are great. One is Andreessen Horowitz podcast. I think it's AZ360 is the name of it. Always great guests, great content. And the other is the Startup Podcast, which is Alex Bloomberg, Gimlet Media. Everything Gimlet does is great, but the Startup Podcast is terrific. They just started their third season. They've been profiling all different companies. I think they did a Twitch recently, which was great. So a really great podcast, and Alex has really done a lot for podcasting. I think in terms of the production value, it's pretty great stuff.
That's awesome. And the last question is, people that's listening in today, if they wanted to get a hold of you, Blake, what's the best way and method that they can do that?
Always email. Blake@inboxhealth.com is great, but also Twitter at Blake0Walker or at Inbox Health. Both are actually me. So yeah, any of those are great ways to get in touch. And we're always trying to be open to contact and communication.
Awesome. Thank you so much. There you have it, folks. We've got Blake Walker, co-founder and chief product officer of Inbox Health. Thank you so much for spending time with us today, Blake. I know it's very busy up there in Connecticut with your team, and really appreciate getting a peek inside of your company today.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks for having us.
And so everybody else, if you want to learn more about this startup and others, I invite you to visit our website at ventureclash.com. That's also the place you'll learn about the $5 million Venture Startup Competition this year that's going on right now for you if you're interested in the digital health InsurTech and FinTech Spaces. I invite you to check that out, figure out what the details of the competition are. Their applications are being taken right now. That's all available for you at ventureclash.com. Till next time, I'm Kenny Jang, host of the Venture Clash Entrepreneurship Podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning into today's episode of the Venture Clash Entrepreneurship Podcast. Drop by www.ventureclash.com as to learn about the $5 million Venture Clash Startup Challenge. We've set aside millions to support your innovation and product offerings. Venture Clash is also the place where you'll find the resources you need to help grow your business. Check out the contest at www.ventureclash.com today.